All right, let's jump right into a really fascinating, kind of mind-bending thought experiment. What happens when you take one of the most beloved figures in all of Eastern spirituality and you analyze him using the tools of one of the most revolutionary and, let's be honest, controversial thinkers of the West? Well, today we're doing just that. We're putting God on the couch. We are going to explore the life of the Hindu deity Krishna, but through the unmistakable lens of Sigmund Freud. I mean, just look at this. On one side, you have Sri Krishna, a being described as the source of all consciousness, whose actions are just divine, purposeless play. It's called Leela. And on the other side, Sigmund Freud, who argued that pretty much everything we do is secretly guided by unconscious drives and messy, repressed conflicts from our childhood. I mean, these two worlds could not be further apart. So the big question for us today is, what actually happens when we use one to analyze the other? The result, you'll see, is a pretty startling new way to understand Krishna's enduring power. So, first things first, let's do a super quick Freudian refresher, just so we're all on the same page. Let's start with the id. You can think of the id as this chaotic, totally primal engine deep inside your psyche. It's the source of all your basic drives. Hunger, desire, aggression. It wants what it wants, and it wants it right now. It operates purely on what Freud called the pleasure principle. No waiting, no rules, just immediate gratification. Then you've got the ego. The ego is kind of the pragmatic manager that has to deal with the id's crazy demands. It's the part of you that understands, hey, you can't always get what you want, at least not right away. It operates on the reality principle, and its whole job is to try and satisfy the id's desires in ways that are actually realistic and, socially acceptable. It's the great mediator between our primal urges and the actual real world. And finally, there's the superego. This is your internalized moral compass. It's built from all the rules and values you picked up from your parents, from society, from school. It's that voice in your head that's always pushing for perfection. It's the source of pride when you do good, but it's also the source of that nagging, awful feeling of guilt when you break the rules. Now, for most of us, these three, the id, ego, and superego, are in a constant state of conflict, like a little civil war going on in our heads. And here is where we get to the absolute core of this whole analysis. The source material argues that in Krishna, these three forces are not at war, not at all. Instead, they're perfectly integrated. He is the ultimate fantasy of a psyche that has achieved complete, unrepressed expression, where the pleasure principle and the reality principle have become one and the same. There's no civil war, just divine harmony. Okay, so let's start breaking this down. We're going to begin where his story does, in the pastoral paradise of Vrindavana, where the young Krishna acts as a perfect embodiment of the id, but not as some dark, repressed force. No, this is the id as a celebrated, completely joyous power. Think about the famous story of Krishna as the butter thief. He doesn't steal butter because he's hungry. He does it for the pure, unadulterated pleasure of the act itself. Now, a Freudian reading sees this as a perfect expression of the oral stage of development, where all gratification is centered on the mouth. The butter itself is the symbol of primal nourishment. But here's the key. In Krishna's story, this id-driven demand for pleasure isn't punished. It's actually celebrated as a divine game, a leela. And this all culminates in the Rasa Leela, this incredible cosmic dance. The story goes that the gopis, who represent souls yearning for the divine, are called into the forest by Krishna's enchanting flute. But there are tons of them and only one Krishna. So what does he do? He multiplies himself so that every single gopi believes she is dancing with him and him alone. This is, brilliantly, the ultimate fantasy of the unrepressed id. It's this dreamlike fulfillment of desire, where the need for connection and love is completely satisfied, for everyone, all at once, totally bypassing all social rules and jealousy. But of course, Krishna doesn't stay a child forever. His journey into adulthood is what marks the formation of a masterful ego, one that has to navigate the really harsh realities of politics, betrayal, and all-out war. And this, of course, brings us to the Oedipus complex. There's this prophecy that the tyrant king Kamsa will be killed by his nephew, Krishna. From a Freudian view, Kamsa is the ultimate oppressive father figure, so Krishna's destined journey to Mathura to kill him is basically a conscious, totally guilt-free acting out of the repressed wish that Freud haunts every son. By slaying Kamsa, Krishna's ego achieves this perfect, complete victory. He resolves the foundational conflict of childhood without any of the lingering neuroses or guilt that would plague a normal person. So, if his id is pure joy and his ego is a total champ, what about his superego? Well, this is where the analysis gets truly paradoxical and kind of mind-blowing. Krishna doesn't have a moral compass that was given to him by society. He is the moral compass. The difference here is just fundamental. Let's look at this side by side. For you and me, morality is something we internalize from our parents, from our culture, and when we break those rules, we feel guilt. But for Krishna, he's the source of all moral law, or dharma. He's not subject to the rules. The rules are subject to him. And that's why, throughout the epic stories, he does things and gives advice that might seem morally tricky to us, yet he never, not once, expresses guilt. There's no internal conflict, and because of that, there's no neurosis. So, what happens when we put all these pieces together? The joyful id, the masterful ego, and this divine superego. Well, we get a much clearer picture of why this figure has held such profound power over millions of people for millennia. And this really is the crucial point of it all. Krishna isn't a patient to be diagnosed. He represents a psychological ideal. He's the dream of what we could be if we weren't constantly at war with ourselves. He is the fantasy of a perfectly integrated self, where our deepest desires aren't sources of shame, but are actually instruments of joy and purpose. He embodies a state of complete, total psychological wholeness. And that leaves us with one final provocative question to chew on. Is this image of a perfectly harmonious psyche? Is that a description of a divine reality? Is it a profound psychological ideal that we can maybe strive for? Or is it simply a beautiful and powerful story, a figment of our collective imagination, yearning for freedom from our own inner conflicts? The answer, well, maybe it lies somewhere in that fascinating space between the couch and the heavens.